This week, Cody Pierce from Endgame joins us to talk about exploit prevention. In our security news for the week, we'll talk about Yahoo spying, Mirai source code lessons learned. I'll try my best, but probably fail, at saying I told you so, and much more. Our interview this week is with Ed Scotus of Counter Hack Challenges and the SANS Institute. Ed's going to discuss IoT security, Holiday Hack Challenge, and the upcoming SANS Hackfest conference, so stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly is brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security training, certification, and research. Visit sans.org to explore the full curriculum and latest training offerings. Onapsis, the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, the Pwn Phone, and the Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com.
And welcome to the show. Why? Because here's a man who, when looking at his lap, rubs a little spit on it. Paul Asadori.
Welcome, everyone, to Security Weekly. We're broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I want to introduce our illustrious host for this evening. I have here on my left Larry Pesci, the director of research and senior managing consultant at InGuardians, the Swami of security, the oracle of the online, hotshot of hacking, destroyer of embedded systems, and injector of RF energy.
Wow, that's a lot to live up. That's a lot to live up to.
Pesci. That's awesome. I wanted to give them the full
experience, the full Monty,
as it were. Mr. Jack Daniel is here with us. He works for Tenable Network Security and is the co-founder of Security B-Sides.
Second Life.
Does Tenable maintain a presence in Second Life or Half-Life?
Half-Life. There's a lot of feedback on Jack and I's. Well, Jack, I think, was having an elderly moment. I was having a drunken moment, and neither of us could remember.
Tim, thank you so much again. Still,
and tell me, you guys remember getafirstlife.com?
No,
you have to go to the
Dude, we couldn't remember Second Life. Come on now, what makes you think we remembered anything else?
The getafirstlife.com was a parody of Second Life.
Oh yes,
and the stuff was great. Access your wardrobe by opening your closet.
Yes.
Go outside and fornicate using your actual genitals.
That's pretty funny. Not much announcements. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe to all of our shows, including Enterprise Security Weekly, Startup Security Weekly, and the recently half-retitled Hack Naked News. We're calling it Hack Naked News now instead of Hack Naked TV, because it is, in fact, a news program
on TV.
and we have a new logo for it and everything. It's a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Cody Pierce is here with us from Endgame. Cody, formerly of HP's Zero-Day Initiative program, has been looking for zero-day vulnerabilities and advanced threats for some time. He currently works for Endgame and recently spoke at Black Hat. Cody, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on, Cody. And today you're going to be telling us about pre-exploit prevention. What does that mean? Isn't that just like patching your stuff, or no? Not really.
Yeah, well, not when you throw 0 days into the mix.
This is true.
The patches don't work too well there. But
I have antivirus on my system. That's not good.
Is it first gen or next?
It's next generation. Advanced. It says it detects all.
First next generation.
Yes, it detects all the APTs, all the cyber APTs.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, you should have probably got the next gen.
Yes.
Helped out. But
next gen.
One of the things we were talking about at our Black Hat talk is kind of the pre-exploit detection, but really what it is the ability to detect exploitation early. And as someone that's written a lot of exploits and bypass defenses, bypass mitigations like emit and things of that nature, the earlier the better. And if you can do it before they actually execute code, that's kind of what I'm calling pre-exploit prevention. And so that's kind of what our research did at Black Hat, and what we research at Endgame, and try to get in there before the exploit writer has the advantage. Because if you give an exploit writer even a single byte to write, or even just a little bit of a foothold, they're super creative, and they might bypass whatever defenses you have.
So are these like things we can do on systems to prevent that, or is this ways in which we structure our software and operating systems to prevent these exploits from taking place?
So I think, vendors like Microsoft, Adobe, they're working on things that they can do with access to source code and with access to, the kernel and the lower levels. And so they can do a lot, and that's kind of what they're focused on. What I believe, there's also room for more of a dynamic approach, so more of a detection of abnormal behavior that can complement that. We've seen a lot of the operating system mitigations bypass. We see Adobe's mitigations bypass. And so we think there's just a defense in depth there. So there's something you need to do on the source side, on the operating system, always run the latest operating system, that kind of same old pitch. And then, there's always going to be room for a dynamic add-on to lock it down even further.
Yeah, so can you give us an example of a dynamic add-on that can help prevent exploitation from occurring?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have one available in our product at Endgame, but I think one of the most common ones is Microsoft's emit tool, and it's primarily focused on ROP prevention. And so what that does is just instruments any application like Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, or your mail clients, and then we'll look for ROP-like patterns or ROP-like side effects or changes that indicate return-oriented program exploit is running, and it'll detect it and block it. So that's a free one that a lot of people know of, and that's a pretty good one. Again, though, I think where we've kind of seen the gaps with emit is it gets bypassed pretty often because it is free and because anybody can download and research it, and it's ROP focused, and a lot of the more advanced attacks are not using return-oriented programming or anything that those type of preventions will pick up on. So, it's a good one for commodity stuff. It's not going to protect against the most advanced exploits or APTs out there. For that, you really have to go to a third-party security vendor.
So what specifically are third-party security vendors offering? We cover the market in our Enterprise Security Weekly show, but what are some of the big differences between what you get from standard antivirus software, what you get from the operating system and the free tools that Microsoft makes available, and a lot of these third-party tools, such as Endgame?
Yeah, so a lot of third-party vendors are looking at exploit prevention in the same light as malware prevention. So they're either looking for an application that's downloading a file and just hooking that function call and calling that bad, or they'll look for ROP patterns. What Endgame is doing a little differently is we're being more forward-leaning on when we detect the exploit. So we'll actually, in real time, trace the execution of an application and determine when something bad is about to happen. And that's what the Black Hat talk was about. Using Intel hardware features, we're able to do that in real time without too much of a performance hit. But there's with anything in the security industry, right? We know that the the marketing kind of spans the gamut, and a lot of people are just focused on the post exploitation when the attacker already executes code, and they look for artifacts that get put on disk or something of that nature, which is more like the malware approach. And then there's a few that are doing the kind of more forward-leaning rot prevention, use after free prevention, exploit prevention on top of what Microsoft and others are doing with mitigations.
So what are some of the advanced techniques that the security companies are going after in terms of prevention? Because I think it's a very interesting area that a lot of people maybe aren't too familiar with. A lot of us are pen testers. We know that our exploits work and they run in most environments, but I think if you had a savvy product or technique to prevent that, these enhanced techniques. So what are some of these enhanced techniques? What are they going to save us against?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things there. The advanced techniques that we're a fan of right now are kind of hardware-based. And so what that means is we're tapping into some features on Intel processors that allow us to inspect the program as it executes. And there's some things that we've come up in research and drawn from academia on that are just, they're known to be abnormal, and they're known to happen when exploits are running. So we've kind of picked up on these abnormalities and are using hardware to enforce what we call control flow integrity. So what that does is it ensures that what's being executed is what the developer intended, and if that deviates, then we can block that. We can pick up on it and call that malicious behavior and exploit. But what we do in the lab is we have dozens and dozens of exploits from VirusTotal that were showing up in APT campaigns, from Metasploit, from Project Zero. And we'll put those in the lab and we'll analyze them and we'll throw them against our solutions, and again build off of what we're discovering as certain features of exploits that we can prevent. Some of the more advanced exploits that we're seeing are doing things like ROPless, we'll call them, but just using their primitives to read and write memory, or calling directly into certain functions that they know will eventually call something to execute their payload. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of moving away from the traditional, what's been happening over the last 10 years is build a ROP chain, call virtual protect on their heap buffer, and then jump into that heap buffer. And they're really doing all that in code, or finding clever ways to just not trigger some of these existing and previous mitigations and preventions.
Yeah, it's interesting, and people have said this on the show in the past, and I don't think we've ever explored it in depth. Like when you execute a buffer overflow or some kind of exploit in the memory of a process, that looks different than the process's normal behavior. And I think it's interesting you had to turn to hardware in order to build a profile and pick up on those abnormalities. But I always thought too that they were right in saying that is like a buffer overflow. I remember Ed Scotus telling me it's like a controlled crash within, or sometimes not so controlled, inside of the process. Yep. And to be able to look at that behavior, that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. There's a lot of them. When you write exploits, when you kind of study it, when you study what the vulnerabilities will give you as an exploit writer, you do pick up on these things that they just should never happen, right? Like in some cases, executing from the heap is not normal. In other cases, it is. But there's always something, right? There's, by nature, triggering a vulnerability and exploiting is going to come from some unattended path, or have some unattended behavior that isn't normal to the process. So the reason that we look at hardware and we really like it is it's using the performance monitor unit, which we talk about in our Black Hat talk. It gives us the ability in real time to inspect what's going on. And previously that was impossible. You couldn't, use a debugger and just watch every instruction, because there's billions of them that are happening, in a minute or so. And the hardware, because Intel has built in some of this cool stuff, will let you look for certain kind of features or patterns or side effects, and then make more bigger checks and deeper checks on what's going on.
So when you actually block something, are you using that same hardware in Intel and those features to actually block it? And are those the same things you're using to detect it?
So yeah, one of the great things about where we're at with using the hardware features, and we're in the kernel when we do this, is that by the time we get what's called an interrupt based off of one of these features, the system is kind of completely stopped. And so at that point, we're kind of freezing all activity, and we're able to make a decision if it's bad. If it's bad, then we can shut down the process. We can terminate it. We can get a crash dump of the process memory, all the network traffic that was going on at the time, and then pull out some of the exploit code or something like that at that time. And that all happens really, really fast because we're utilizing the hardware to do this.
So suffice it to say, is this reserved for newer Intel platforms, and what stretch of time are we talking about to the processors that support this feature?
So the feature's been around. I think the biggest improvement is that we're using something called the branch prediction unit, and the biggest improvement is generationally with these processors, the branch prediction unit gets better. And so the newer the generation, the less of a performance hit using this approach is. And so the performance monitoring unit that we use to catch these things goes back to Core 2 Duo or Pentium 4. But you don't actually want to do it on those old platforms because your machine would just come to a crawl. So what we kind of recommend is Ivy Bridge, which is 2011, I think. Up to Skylake is perfectly usable. You don't notice any kind of lag or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So do you market that as finding zero-day attacks? Speaking of marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go out to prevent exploits, that's kind of your test, right? That's what you always want to shoot for, and we're confident that this approach will catch zero-day exploits. Again, we modeled tons of exploits out of Metasploit and VirusTotal, and while they were already patched, we aren't adding signatures to it. So it's not like we have to add signatures to this approach or update it every month when patches come out. So we could kind of go back in time and do a regression test without really touching our algorithm, and we caught all of them. I mean, I think we're 95% detection on about 40 to 45 exploits, including some from VirusTotal, including Metasploit. So yeah, we market that. I think that's what everybody kind of wants out of their exploit prevention, is the ability to catch the 0 days. But as a pen tester, you would know it's not always 0 days. So we also, put a lot of effort into making sure we catch what we hope on the 0 day side, but certainly all the public stuff as well.
I like the approach, though, in focusing more on the technique than the actual signature of the exploit. I think that's where it's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's not. It's too hard to reverse and analyze every single vulnerability and exploit that comes out. When you do it enough, though, when you have enough experience, you do start to only see a few patterns, and so those don't change in what we want to do. And I think Microsoft and other vendors would say this. You want to make the exploit writer's job so difficult that they move elsewhere, they try something else, or it takes them 6 months to come up with a new exploit technique. And that's what we're really confident we can do. So we are just general about the kind of technique and what they're trying to achieve and blocking that, hoping that they'll have to refactor and invest a lot more time to try to overcome those limitations.
Mm-hmm. So this is surely in the exploit phase. Are there any detections that you have in the same realm that can detect behavior that is typical of malware? Because, I mean, let's face it, a lot of malware or payloads, right, doesn't require an exploit. We had Josh Abram on the show and talked about basically guessing credentials, and all the abuses that we've seen to Microsoft Windows authentication lead to further system compromise and deeper into the network. So Are there any behavioral things that you can pick up on these that don't look at exploits but look at behavior? Someone downloaded malware and double-clicked on it and executed it.
Yeah. So we actually have a couple of pillars within the research group and within our product at Endgame. The exploit is just one feature of that. We have machine learning for the AV side of things. So they're able to pick up and classify any file dropped to disk and score that with what we call a malware score. We have behavioral analysis based on kind of real-time eventing that we're really working towards, picking out some of those things like PowerShell usage, lateral movement, things that might not be malware or exploits. And the others is just kind of outlier analytics. So there's like 4 things that we kind of do. I'll be the first to tell you, right, the exploit is not the only way to get in. There's all these different ways that people can get in and often use, as you said, just send an email and ask the person to click a link and download something. So yeah, we have the whole thing. We're looking to kind of be comprehensive in it because we know one solution or one approach is just not going to work. You're going to have multiple well thought out approaches to completely attempt to cover and prevent some of this stuff. Awesome.
So now, Cody, I should have stated that Endgame is now a proud sponsor of Security Weekly, and this is a sponsor interview. But one of the Endgame came on my radar for a couple of different reasons. I actually know someone pretty well that works at Endgame. But before we did that, I started reading your blog, and my friend would send me things, and I'm like, yeah, dude, like that's really
damn nice,
cool stuff. So do you post some about these techniques and other things on the blog or others on your team? Oh, we lost your audio for a second there, Cody. Oh, there we. I think I can hear you now.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. We've done a blog post on the exploit stuff. We released a paper that we put out from Black Hat. We did a kind of a tech talk, a webinar on it as well. We're not afraid to put all of our ideas and techniques and things on our blog. We kind of hope it builds some trust and dialogue with the community. The same goes for our data scientists who put up their evaluation of different machine learning algorithms. So yeah, we try to publish pretty often up there and put as much technical information as possible just to kind of get our ideas out there and start a conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. So people can visit endgame.com, go to the blog section, and read the blog where, as Cody alluded to and I said before, the quality of articles and research that is coming on the Endgame blog is just, it's awesome. It's one of the reasons why we were happy to have them as a sponsor, because they give back to the community, and they share all of their probably not all, right, but a lot of the techniques in varying levels of detail. So, Cody, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back and talk about our stories for the week. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.